Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. Santiago Kramer stood in his dimly lit garage at 3:17 a.m., methodically cleaning his Glock 19, a ritual that helped quiet the restless energy that plagued his nights since returning from Afghanistan 3 years ago. The muscle memory of weapon maintenance was therapeutic, each motion precise and deliberate, just like the man himself. The shrill ring of his phone shattered the silence. Unknown number. Santiago's jaw tightened as he recognized the area code. State Police. Mr. Kramer? This is Sergeant Mills with the Colorado State Patrol. Your father, Richard Kramer, has been involved in a serious accident. He's at Denver General, ICU. You need to get here immediately. Santiago's blood ran cold. His father was the toughest man he knew, a retired Marine who'd survived 2 tours in Vietnam and 30 years as a construction foreman. What happened? Vehicle ran off Highway 285 near Fairplay. Sir, it's touch and go. 20 minutes later, Santiago's black Silverado roared through empty Denver streets. His mind raced through possibilities, but nothing prepared him for what he found at the hospital. Richard Kramer, the man who'd taught him to shoot, fight, and never back down, lay unconscious with tubes snaking from his bruised and broken body. Dr. Emily Chun, a petite woman with kind but weary eyes, pulled Santiago aside. Your father has severe internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs, and a traumatic brain injury. We've stabilized him, but the next 48 hours are critical. What exactly happened out there? According to the accident reconstruction, another vehicle forced him off the road. We found paint transfer on his truck. Someone hit him deliberately. Santiago's hands clenched into fists. In Afghanistan, they called him the Reaper, not just for his sniper skills, but for his ability to hunt down those who hurt his brothers in arms. That cold, calculating part of his mind was awakening. Dad, Santiago whispered, taking his father's weathered hand. Richard's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. When they locked onto Santiago's face, urgency flooded them. Son, his voice was barely a rasp. Miranda and that man, they were digging. Dad, save your strength. No. Richard gripped Santiago's hand with surprising force. In the woods behind your property. I saw them. They had shovels and Emma's backpack. Santiago's world tilted. Emma, his 12-year-old daughter, his whole universe. Dad, Emma's at her friend's house for the weekend. Called the school Friday. She never made it to Jessica's. Richard's breathing became labored. Been missing 2 days, son. They saw my car. Ran me off the road to keep me quiet. The heart monitor's beeping accelerated as Richard fought to stay conscious. Miranda's been planning this. That boyfriend of hers, Christian Jacobs, he's bad news. I followed him last week, criminal record. They think you don't know about the affair. Santiago felt his military training kick in, suppressing the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. Emotional decisions got soldiers killed. He needed facts, strategy, and swift action. Where exactly in the woods, Dad? Old mining trail. Quarter-mile past the creek. Santiago, Richard's eyes pleaded. She might still be alive. But Miranda, she's not who you think she is. As if summoned by their conversation, Miranda Whitney Kramer appeared in the doorway. At 34, she was still stunning. Auburn hair, green eyes, and a figure that turned heads. But Santiago now noticed what he'd been blind to before. The calculated coldness behind her beauty, the way she assessed situations rather than feeling them. Oh my God, Santiago! She rushed to his side, playing the concerned wife perfectly. I came as soon as I got your message. How is he? Santiago studied her face, searching for any sign of genuine concern. Instead, he caught the subtle glance she made toward Richard, checking if he was conscious. There was something else, relief when she saw the breathing tube that prevented him from speaking clearly. He's stable, Santiago said carefully. Where's Emma? I tried calling Jessica's house. Oh, she changed her mind about the sleepover. She's at my sister Rachel's place in Colorado Springs. You know how kids are. Miranda's explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. Santiago nodded, but his mind was cataloging inconsistencies. Miranda's sister lived in Phoenix, and her name was Robin, not Rachel. His wife of 8 years had just lied to his face about their daughter's whereabouts while his father lay dying from what he claimed was an attempted murder. "I should go check on Emma," Santiago said, watching Miranda's reaction. A flicker of panic crossed her features before she masked it. "She's probably asleep. Maybe wait until morning." "No, I need to see her now. After Dad's accident." Santiago let his voice trail off, playing the worried father. Inside, his tactical mind was already working, filing away every micro-expression, every hesitation. As they left the hospital, Santiago made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Miranda directly, he would do what he'd been trained to do: gather intelligence, identify targets, and eliminate threats to his family. The Reaper was awake, and this time it was personal. Chapter 2. The Hunt Begins. Santiago drove through the pre-dawn darkness, his exterior calm masking the storm inside. Miranda sat beside him, texting someone rapidly, supposedly her sister Rachel, to let her know they were coming. But Santiago caught glimpses of the messages in the reflection of the passenger window. He's suspicious. "Need to move timeline up. Is package secure?" Package. His daughter was a package to them. As they approached the highway split that would take them to Colorado Springs, Santiago made a sudden decision. "Actually, let's grab some coffee first. I need to clear my head before we get Emma." Miranda's fingers tightened on her phone. "Santiago, it's 4 in the morning. Everything's closed. There's a 24-hour truck stop off the next exit. 5 minutes." Santiago's tone brooked no argument, the same voice that had commanded respect from hardened soldiers in combat zones. At the truck stop, while Miranda used the restroom, Santiago activated the GPS tracking app he'd installed on all their phones after a close call during Emma's school field trip last year. Miranda's location history told a different story than her words. Yesterday evening, she'd been nowhere near Denver. Instead, her phone had traced a path to an abandoned mining area in the mountains, exactly where his father described seeing them digging. But it was the list of recent calls that made Santiago's blood run cold. Multiple calls to and from Christian Jacobs throughout the past week. 15-minute conversation yesterday at 6 p.m., right around the time his father would have been heading home from his weekly grocery run. Santiago had met Christian once, 6 months ago, when Miranda claimed he was just a work friend from the real estate office where she'd recently started working. Even then, Santiago's instincts had screamed danger. Christian was too smooth, too charming, with predator's eyes that assessed everyone for weaknesses. A quick background check on his phone revealed what his father had discovered. Christian Jacobs, 36, had served 18 months for fraud and had been questioned in connection with a missing person case in Nevada 3 years ago. No charges filed, but the pattern was there for anyone trained to see it. Miranda returned. Her demeanor shifted to aggressive innocence. "Can we go now? I'm worried about Emma." "Absolutely." Santiago started the engine, but instead of heading toward Colorado Springs, he took the on-ramp back toward Denver. "Actually, let's swing by the house first. I want to check if Emma left any clues about where she really wanted to go." "Santiago, she's not at the house." "I know where she's not," he said quietly. "The question is where she actually is." The drive home was tense, Miranda making increasingly frantic calls to someone she kept calling Rachel. But Santiago noticed she never actually spoke to Emma, never put his daughter on the phone despite his requests. Their house sat on 5 acres of pine forest, isolated and peaceful, or so Santiago had thought. Now he saw it through a predator's eyes. Remote, soundproof, with multiple escape routes and places to hide evidence. Perfect for people with dark intentions. Santiago parked and immediately noticed what his civilian mindset had missed before. Tire tracks from a vehicle that wasn't theirs, cigarette butts of a brand neither he nor Miranda smoked. And most damning of all, disturbed earth near the tool shed where someone had recently buried and then relocated something. "Miranda," Santiago said as they entered the house. "Call Emma. Put her on speaker. I want to hear her voice." Miranda's mask finally slipped. "Santiago, you're being paranoid. Call her now." Miranda dialed, but Santiago heard the truth in the ring tone. It went straight to voicemail. Emma's phone was off. Had been off for 2 days, according to the carrier's automated system when he called to check. Her phone's dead, Miranda said quickly. Rachel doesn't have a charger that fits. Santiago moved with the fluid grace of a predator. In one smooth motion, he stepped behind Miranda, removed her phone from her hands, and scrolled through her recent messages. What he found there would have broken a lesser man. Christian, the hole is ready. Make sure he's out of town when we do this. Miranda, he's visiting his father tomorrow night. Emma suspects something. Might need to sedate her. Christian, no loose ends this time. You promised. Miranda, after the insurance money clears, we disappear. Santiago will never find us. Santiago's training kicked in, suppressing the rage that threatened to consume him. Emotion was a liability. He needed Miranda alive and talking until he found Emma. Sit down, he said, his voice carrying the authority of command. Miranda finally understood she'd been caught. Her beautiful features hardened into something uglier, more honest. You don't understand, Santiago. We're in love. Real love, not this suburban fantasy you've trapped me in. Where's my daughter? She's safe. For now. Miranda's voice carried a new edge of cruelty. But Christian's not a patient man. The longer this takes, the more unstable he becomes around children. Santiago felt the cold fury that had made him legendary in Afghanistan. The same ice-cold calculation that had allowed him to take out targets from impossible distances while his team counted on him to bring them home alive. Here's what's going to happen, Santiago said, settling into the wingback chair across from her, the same chair where he'd read Emma bedtime stories just a week ago. You're going to tell me exactly what you and Christian have planned, where my daughter is, and why you thought you could get away with this. Miranda laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Or what? You'll hurt me? You're too much of a Boy Scout, Santiago. It's why Christian was so easy to choose over you. Santiago smiled then, an expression that would have terrified anyone who'd served with him. Miranda, you have no idea what I'm capable of. In Afghanistan, they call me the Reaper. Would you like to know why? For the first time since this nightmare began, Miranda looked genuinely afraid. The hunt had begun. Chapter 3, Sins of the Past. Santiago observed Miranda's fear with a dispassionate analysis of a sniper lining up a shot. Fear made people sloppy, and sloppy people revealed truths they meant to hide. The Reaper, Miranda repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Christian said you were just some desk jockey in the military. Christian knows a lot about lying, doesn't he? Santiago moved closer, noting how her body tensed. 3 tours, Miranda. 87 confirmed kills. But it wasn't the killing that earned me the name. It was the hunting. I could track insurgents through mountains for weeks, learn their routines, their weaknesses, their pressure points. Santiago pulled out his laptop and began typing, his fingers flying over keys with practiced efficiency. For instance, did you know Christian Jacobs isn't his real name? His birth name is Christian Jacobs Morrison, and he legally changed it after skipping bail on fraud charges in Oregon. Miranda's face paled, or that his first wife, Rebecca Morrison, went missing during their divorce proceedings. Never found her body, but the life insurance paid out nicely. Santiago turned the screen toward her. Interesting pattern. Rebecca's daughter from her first marriage, little girl named Sophie, age 10, also went missing the same weekend. Case went cold when Christian had an ironclad alibi. You're lying, Miranda whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Bank records don't lie. Neither do cell phone towers. Santiago's voice remained level, professional. Christian's been very busy these past 6 months. Regular deposits into an offshore account. Payments from something called Clearwater Holdings, which, by the way, is a shell company registered in Nevada with no legitimate business operations. Santiago had spent the past hour conducting the kind of deep-dive investigation that would have taken civilian authorities weeks. Military intelligence training combined with high-security clearance had taught him to access information most people never dreamed existed. But here's the interesting part, Santiago continued, pulling up another file. Christian's not the mastermind. He's just the muscle. Clearwater Holdings is owned by someone else entirely. Someone with deep pockets and deeper connections. Someone who's been watching our family for a very long time. Miranda's composure cracked completely. How did you know about Richard Nunez? Santiago watched her flinch at the name. Your work friend from the real estate office? Except Nunez doesn't work in real estate. He works in human trafficking, Miranda. Children, specifically. The pieces had fallen into place with horrifying clarity. Santiago's investigation had revealed a network that went far beyond a simple affair. Miranda had been recruited, targeted specifically because of her access to Santiago's military pension, their isolated property, and most importantly, their daughter. Emma was never the target. Was she? Santiago's voice carried deadly quiet. She was the product. You've been grooming my daughter for sale to Nunez's clients. Miranda's confession came in a rush of desperate words. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Christian said, we just disappear, start over somewhere else. But then Nunez offered so much money for a girl Emma's age, and Christian said one transaction would set us up for life. Santiago felt his self-control slipping for the first time since the nightmare began. The thought of his innocent daughter being sold to predators was more than his mind could process. But his training held barely. Where is she, Miranda? There's a cabin near Fairplay, off County Road 9. Christian's keeping her there until... Miranda couldn't finish the sentence. Until the sale goes through. Santiago completed her thought, his voice carrying the promise of retribution. When? Tonight. Nunez is flying in from Las Vegas with the buyer. Some tech billionaire who collects. Miranda stopped, perhaps realizing how damning her words were. Santiago checked his watch, 7:43 a.m. Emma had been missing for 51 hours, and they planned to hand her over to monsters in less than 12 hours. There's something else, Miranda said, desperation making her reckless with information. Christian doesn't trust Nunez. He's planning to eliminate everyone after the transaction, including me. I heard him on the phone yesterday, talking about cleaning house. So you're all planning to betray each other. Santiago almost smiled at the poetic justice. Honor among thieves. Santiago stood and walked to his gun safe, entering the combination with steady fingers. Inside were his service weapons, maintained and ready, along with equipment most civilians would never recognize. As he loaded magazines with precise, economical movements, he made his decision. Here's how this ends, Miranda. You're going to call Christian and tell him there's been a change of plans. Tell him I'm getting suspicious and they need to move Emma to a different location, somewhere I'll specify. He won't believe that. He will, because you're going to sell it perfectly. Because if you don't, I'm going to demonstrate exactly why they call me the Reaper. Santiago's voice carried absolute conviction. And Miranda? Once Emma is safe, you're going to pray that the legal system gets to you before I do. Santiago's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo of Emma, bound and frightened but alive, along with a message. Change of plans. Bring $50,000 cash to the old Blackhawk mine by noon, or the girl dies. Come alone. No police. But Santiago wasn't planning to bring money. He was bringing more. As he gathered his tactical gear, Santiago felt the familiar calm that preceded combat operations. Christian Jacobs and his partners had made a critical error in targeting a Special Forces operative's family. They were about to learn why some predators were better left sleeping. Chapter 4. The Wolf Among Sheep. Santiago arrived at the abandoned Blackhawk mine 30 minutes early, moving through the terrain with a ghost-like silence that had made him legendary among his Special Operations unit. The mine sat in a natural bowl surrounded by pine forest, with only 2 viable access roads, perfect for an ambush, which meant Christian had some tactical awareness. But Christian was thinking like a criminal, not a soldier. Santiago had spent 2 hours studying satellite imagery, topographical maps, and historical surveys of the mine complex. He knew there were 4 abandoned shafts, 6 outbuildings, and a maze of underground tunnels that connected to the main processing facility. More importantly, he knew the terrain like a predator knows its hunting ground. Through his scope, Santiago observed the setup. Christian's black Escalade was parked near the main building, positioned for a quick escape. 2 other men flanked the entrance, hired muscle, Probably ex-cons based on their posture and nervous energy. Amateur hour. But it was the fourth figure that made Santiago's blood run cold. A man in an expensive suit standing beside a modified cargo van, the kind used by child traffickers. Richard Nunez had arrived early, which meant the timeline had accelerated. Santiago activated his throat mic, connected to a secure channel he'd established. Overwatch to base, targets confirmed. Base was Detective Luis Morris, Santiago's former Army buddy who'd joined Denver PD after his service. Luis had arrived at the hospital that morning to check on Richard Kramer and walked into Santiago's war planning session. When Santiago explained the situation, Luis had made a career-defining decision to help his brother-in-arms off the books. Copy, Overwatch. Backup units in position, but holding at your signal. Santiago had no intention of waiting for backup. Emma had been in the hands of predators for over 50 hours. Every minute increased the psychological damage and decreased her chances of recovery. The mission was clear: extract the asset, eliminate the threats. Through his scope, Santiago watched Christian pace anxiously near the mine entrance. The man was clearly on edge, checking his phone repeatedly and scanning the access road. Good. Nervous people made mistakes. Santiago's earpiece crackled. Movement in Building 3. Thermal shows one small heat signature, possibly your daughter. Santiago felt a surge of protective fury, but channeled it into cold purpose. Emma was alive and relatively close. Now came the delicate part: extracting her without giving the hostiles time to harm her. Santiago had brought more than just weapons. From his military connections, he'd acquired specialized equipment: flashbang grenades, smoke canisters, and a small quantity of military-grade sedative gas. The plan was surgical: incapacitate the hostiles simultaneously, secure Emma, then deal with the aftermath. Moving like a shadow, Santiago circulated to the blind side of the mine complex, using the abandoned equipment and mineral piles as cover. His target was Building 3, where thermal imaging suggested Emma was being held. But as he reached his insertion point, Santiago's earpiece crackled with devastating news. Overwatch. Additional vehicles approaching from the south. Count 4 SUVs, multiple passengers. This is bigger than we thought. Through his binoculars, Santiago watched the convoy arrive. More men in suits, more predators coming to inspect their merchandise. The scope of the operation was larger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just about Emma, it was some kind of trafficking summit. Santiago's tactical mind immediately recalculated. Too many targets for a solo extraction. But retreating meant leaving Emma in the hands of monsters for hours longer while backup arrived and red tape was navigated. That's when Santiago's phone rang. Christian's voice was smugly confident. "I see you out there, Reaper." "Yeah, that's right. Miranda told me about your little nickname." Impressive gear for a suburban dad. "Let me talk to my daughter. She's indisposed at the moment." Nunez's associate is evaluating the merchandise. Christian's laugh was filled with cruelty. "But here's the thing, soldier boy. This is bigger than you realized. You're looking at representatives from 5 different organizations. This isn't just about one missing girl. It's about sending a message." Santiago felt ice form in his veins. What message? That military families aren't untouchable. That heroes have pressure points just like everyone else. You want to know why Emma was really chosen? Christian's voice carried vicious satisfaction. Because word got out about Santiago Kramer, the big bad Delta Force operator who thought he could retire to suburbia and live happily ever after. The implications hit Santiago like a physical blow. This wasn't random. Emma's kidnapping was retaliation, a demonstration that no one was beyond their reach. You made enemies overseas, Santiago. Enemies with long memories and deep pockets. Emma is just collateral damage in a war you thought you'd left behind. Santiago's mind raced through the possibilities. Which operation? Which target's family was seeking revenge? How many others like him were being targeted? But those questions would have to wait. Right now, only one thing mattered. Christian, Santiago's voice carried the promise of death. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Santiago disconnected the call and activated a different frequency. one that connected him to resources that officially didn't exist. Ghost Wolf to Sword Base. Authorization: Black Raven 77. The response came immediately. Sword Base copies, Ghost Wolf. Assets available for immediate deployment. Request emergency extraction support and tactical assistance. Multiple hostile targets, civilian in danger. Situation is compromised. Copy that. Birds in the air, ETA, 15 minutes. Santiago smiled grimly. Christian and his associates thought they were hunting a lone wolf. They were about to discover they'd awakened an entire pack. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Reckoning Begins. Santiago had 15 minutes before his backup arrived, but Emma didn't have 15 minutes. Through his earpiece, he could hear movement in Building 3, multiple voices, including a man's voice speaking in calm, clinical tones about product quality and market specifications. The sedative gas was his best option for a silent breach, but it would take 3 minutes to take effect, and 3 minutes was too long if they decided to harm Emma. Santiago needed a distraction. He activated a small device he'd placed near Christian's Escalade, a military-grade signal jammer that would block all cell phone and radio communications within a half-mile radius. The jamming would prevent the hostiles from coordinating, but it would also cut off Santiago's support. From now on, he was operating alone. Santiago moved to the ventilation system of Building 3. The old mine had been retrofitted with modern HVAC during an abandoned renovation project, giving him access to the interior without going through doors or windows. As he carefully removed a vent grating, he could hear voices below. The subject is in excellent condition. An unfamiliar voice with a slight accent was saying. Psychological profile indicates strong resistance to conditioning, which some clients prefer. Santiago's vision went red. They were talking about his daughter like livestock. Through the vent, Santiago could see into the room below. Emma sat in a metal chair, her hands zip-tied behind her back, but her eyes were alert and defiant. Even terrified and captive, she hadn't broken. Santiago felt a surge of pride mixed with rage. 3 men surrounded her: Christian Jacobs, Richard Nunez, and a third man Santiago didn't recognize, tall, European, with the predator's eyes Santiago knew too well. The buyer is confirmed, the European said, checking an expensive watch. Transport arrives in 20 minutes. Payment on delivery. Santiago had heard enough. He dropped 2 smoke canisters through the vent system and immediately rappelled down into the chaos. The smoke filled the room instantly, but Santiago moved through it like he was born to darkness. Night vision gave him a critical advantage as the 3 men stumbled blindly, calling out to each other in panic. Santiago's first target was the European, who was reaching for Emma. A precise strike to the carotid artery dropped him unconscious before he could cry out. Christian spun toward the sound, gun in hand, but Santiago was already moving. Combat knife between the ribs, angled upward toward the heart. A kill strike Santiago had used dozens of times overseas. But this time, he pulled the blade at the last second, allowing it to deflect off bone. Christian collapsed, severely wounded but alive. Santiago wanted him to suffer. Richard Nunez had found the exit and was stumbling toward it, but Santiago anticipated the movement. A thrown knife caught Nunez in the back of the thigh, dropping him to the ground. Emma. Santiago called through the smoke. It's Dad. Stay calm. I'm getting you out of here. Daddy. Emma's voice was strong despite her ordeal. I knew you'd come. I knew it. Santiago cut her restraints and gathered her in his arms, checking for injuries. Apart from dehydration and exhaustion, she appeared physically unharmed. The psychological damage would take time to assess. We need to move, sweetheart. Can you run? Yes, sir. Emma had inherited her father's strength. But as they reached the door, Santiago realized the smoke had dispersed enough to reveal their positions. Outside, he could hear shouts and running footsteps. The other hostiles were converging on Building 3. Santiago activated his final contingency, a series of small explosive devices he'd planted around the mine complex. Not enough to kill, but enough to create chaos and confusion. The charges detonated in sequence, sending the arriving reinforcements diving for cover. "Stay close to me," Santiago told Emma as they moved through the smoke and dust. "Do exactly what I say when I say it." Father and daughter moved through the mine complex like ghosts, using Santiago's knowledge of the terrain to avoid the scattered hostiles. But as they reached the perimeter, Santiago realized they were surrounded. Headlights appeared on all access roads. More vehicles arriving, more predators joining the hunt. Santiago counted at least 12 men, all armed, all professionals. Santiago's backup was still 10 minutes out. Too long. That's when Emma surprised him. "Dad, there's something I didn't tell them," she whispered as they crouched behind an abandoned cart. "I know why they took me." Santiago looked at his daughter with new eyes. "What do you mean? I've been watching them for weeks. Mom acting weird. That man Christian coming around when you weren't home. I found some papers in Mom's purse, bank accounts, plane tickets, stuff about selling houses." Emma's voice was steady, mature beyond her years. "I copied everything and hid it." Santiago felt his heart swell with pride and break with sorrow simultaneously. His 12-year-old daughter had been conducting her own investigation while he'd been obliviously trusting his wife. "Where did you hide it?" "My emergency box. Behind a loose board in my closet." Emma met his eyes. "Dad, they're not just after me. There's a list of other families, other kids. Military families." The implications were staggering. Emma had stumbled onto evidence of a larger conspiracy, one that targeted the families of service members as revenge and profit. "Emma, you may have just saved more lives than you know." The sound of approaching boots interrupted their conversation. Santiago counted 4 men moving toward their position, using tactical formations that suggested military training. Santiago made a decision that went against every protective instinct he had. "Emma, I need you to do something very dangerous and very important." He handed her a small device, a GPS beacon with an encrypted transmission capability. "When I give you the signal, you run straight toward the tree line. Don't look back. Don't stop. This beacon will guide my backup to you." "What about you?" Santiago looked at his daughter with fierce love. "I'm going to teach these men why they should never threaten our family." Santiago stood up from their cover, hands raised, making himself a target. As the 4 men converged on his position, Emma disappeared into the darkness with the silent grace of her father's daughter. Now Santiago could fight without restraint. The hostiles thought they were capturing him. They were wrong. They had just walked into the Reaper's killing ground. Chapter 6: Blood in the Mountain. Santiago allowed himself to be surrounded, hands raised in apparent surrender, buying Emma precious time to escape. The 4 men approached with professional caution, definitely ex-military, probably private contractors hired by Nunez's organization. "The famous Reaper," the lead man said with a slight South African accent. "Heard a lot about you, mate. Disappointing to see you go down so easy." Santiago smiled. The night's young. When they moved to zip-tie his hands, Santiago exploded into motion. 3 years of retirement hadn't dulled his reflexes. If anything, the rage of a father protecting his child had sharpened them to razor precision. The first man never saw the strike coming. Santiago's elbow connected with his temple with enough force to drop him instantly. The second man's rifle was still coming up when Santiago's knife found the gap between his body armor plates. The third man managed to get a shot off, but Santiago was already moving, using the second man's body as cover. The bullet meant for Santiago's chest instead caught his human shield. Santiago's thrown knife caught the third man in the throat before he could fire again. The South African had fallen back, speaking rapidly into his radio, calling for backup. But the radio was dead. Santiago's signal jammer was still active. "Just you and me now," Santiago said, approaching with predatory calm. The South African was good, probably special forces trained. He fought with skill and desperation, landing several solid hits. But Santiago fought with something stronger than training, the absolute certainty that failure meant his daughter's death. The fight ended with Santiago's hands around the man's throat, squeezing until consciousness fled. Alive but barely. Santiago's earpiece crackled with static. then cleared as friendly voices broke through the jamming. Ghost Wolf, this is Angel Flight. We have your beacon on scope, inbound to your position. ETA 2 minutes. Through the darkness, Santiago could hear the distinctive sound of military helicopters approaching. His backup had arrived, but the nightmare wasn't over. Christian's voice echoed across the mine complex through a portable bullhorn, weak but filled with venom. Very impressive, Santiago, but you missed something important. While you were playing soldier, we activated our contingency plan. Santiago's blood turned to ice. Miranda's at Emma's school right now, along with our associates. Amazing how easy it is to walk into an elementary school when you're the mother of a student. We have 12 more children, Santiago. 12 more little insurance policies. Santiago activated his throat mic. Angel Flight, change of mission. Need immediate transport to Riverside Elementary School. Multiple hostiles, children in danger. Copy that, Ghost Wolf. Birds inbound. But even as the helicopters descended, Santiago knew they might be too late. The school was 15 minutes away, and every minute counted when children's lives hung in the balance. As Santiago climbed into the lead helicopter, he caught sight of Emma's beacon signal moving steadily away from the mine. She was safe, but 12 other children were now in the crosshairs of a woman who had proven herself capable of any betrayal. Sir, the helicopter's crew chief handed Santiago a tablet displaying real-time surveillance of Riverside Elementary. School's an emergency lockdown, but we count multiple heat signatures in the main building. Could be teachers, could be hostiles. Santiago studied the building layout, his mind automatically calculating entry points, sight lines, and tactical approaches. But this wasn't a military target in a combat zone. This was a school filled with innocent children. What's the play? Ghost Wolf, the pilot asked through the intercom. Santiago made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Fast rope insertion onto the roof. Single operator, minimal noise. These people want to use children as shields, but they've never faced someone who specializes in close-quarters combat with no collateral damage. Sir, that's a suicide mission. Unknown number of hostiles, innocent targets in the line of fire. I've done worse with better odds, Santiago replied, checking his equipment. Besides, they made one critical error. What's that? Santiago's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who had stared death in the face and never blinked. They threatened my daughter's classmates. Every one of those kids matters to Emma, which means they matter to me. As the helicopter banked toward Riverside Elementary School, Santiago prepared for the most important mission of his life. In Afghanistan, he'd fought for freedom and democracy, noble causes but abstract. This time, he was fighting for 12 terrified children who deserved to go home to their families. This time, it was personal in ways that made his training feel like a warm-up. The Reaper was going back to work. Chapter 7, The School of Nightmares. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm as Santiago prepared for what could be his final mission. Below, Riverside Elementary sat eerily quiet under emergency lockdown, its cheerful playground equipment casting strange shadows in the pre-dawn darkness. Through his headset, Santiago received intel from Detective Morris, who had coordinated with federal authorities. Ghost Wolf, we have eyes inside via security cameras. Miranda and 3 associates have barricaded themselves in the gymnasium with 12 children and 2 teachers. They're demanding safe passage to the airport and a plane to Mexico. Santiago studied the school's blueprint on his tablet. The gymnasium was the worst possible location. One main entrance, high windows, and no cover for the hostages. Miranda had chosen well. Any demands regarding me specifically? They want you to surrender yourself in exchange for the children. Standard hostage negotiation, accept. Miranda's not acting like someone who expects to survive this. She's talking like someone on a suicide mission. Santiago felt a chill that had nothing to do with altitude. A corner predator was unpredictable, and Miranda had nothing left to lose. Her affair was exposed, her trafficking network compromised, and her co-conspirators either dead or captured. Permission to go loud, command. Negative, Ghost Wolf. Too many variables, too many innocent lives. But Santiago was already unclipping his safety harness. Sometimes you have to trust the man on the ground. Before anyone could stop him, Santiago fast roped down to the school's roof. His boots hit the gravel with practiced silence, and within seconds he'd located the maintenance access he'd identified from the blueprints. The school's interior was eerily quiet, emergency lighting casting everything in an amber glow. Santiago moved through empty hallways lined with children's artwork and motivational posters, innocent decorations that made the current situation even more obscene. Through his earpiece, he could hear Miranda's voice over the negotiator's radio link. "You think I'm stupid? I know Santiago's in the building. I can feel him coming, like a shark in bloody water. But here's what he doesn't know. I've rigged this place with enough explosives to level the entire wing." Santiago paused. Miranda wasn't bluffing. She'd had hours to prepare, and she'd proven herself capable of anything. But explosives meant she was planning to take everyone with her rather than face capture and prosecution. Santiago switched to a secure channel. "Emma, if you can hear this, I need you to stay exactly where you are until this is over." Emma's voice came back immediately. "Dad, I'm safe with the FBI agents. But I remembered something else about the papers I found. Miranda's not working alone. There's someone called the Shepherd giving orders. And Dad, I think the Shepherd is in the school." Santiago felt the pieces click into place. Miranda wasn't a mastermind. She was expendable muscle, just like Christian. The real power behind the trafficking network was still hidden, still pulling strings. Santiago reached the gymnasium and peered through the door's reinforced glass window. What he saw made his blood boil. 12 children, ages 6 to 12, huddled together in the center of the basketball court. 2 teachers, Miss Fowler and Mr. Williamson, stood protectively near them, but their faces showed the strain of hours under threat. Miranda paced along the perimeter, a pistol in one hand and what looked like a detonator in the other. But it was the fourth figure that caught Santiago's attention, a man in an expensive suit standing in the shadows near the emergency exit. The Shepherd. Santiago activated his throat mic and whispered to his backup, "I have eyes on all targets. For hostiles, 14 innocents. Primary target is armed with explosives." But as Santiago prepared for entry, his earpiece crackled with Emma's panicked voice. "Dad, the FBI agents say there are more men coming to the school. They think it's a trap." Through the gymnasium's high windows, Santiago could see headlights approaching, multiple vehicles moving with tactical precision. The Shepherd hadn't come to rescue Miranda. He'd come to eliminate witnesses and tie up loose ends. Santiago made a split-second decision that went against all tactical doctrine. Instead of waiting for backup, he kicked open the gymnasium door and walked in with his hands visible. "Miranda," he called out calmly, "let's end this." The children looked up at him with a mixture of hope and terror. Santiago recognized several faces from Emma's birthday parties and school events. Jessica Torres, Billy Chun, the Hoffman twins. These weren't just hostages. They were kids he'd driven to soccer practice and helped with science fair projects. The famous Santiago Kramer, the Shepherd, stepped out of the shadows, revealing a face Santiago recognized from intelligence briefings. Edwin Wong, a former CIA operative who'd gone rogue 5 years ago and disappeared into the criminal underworld. "I was hoping we'd have a chance to chat." Edwin Wong, "Thought you were dead. Professional courtesy from old friends. But you've caused quite a disruption to my operation." Wong's voice carried the cultured tone of a man who'd attended Ivy League schools before choosing to profit from human misery. Miranda here was supposed to be a simple extraction: steal the soldier's daughter, break his spirit, send a message to other retired operators who might interfere with our business. Santiago kept his hands visible while calculating distances and angles. "Instead, you got a war." "Indeed. But wars have casualties." Wong nodded to Miranda, who raised the detonator. "The children die unless you surrender. Then we all walk away." Santiago looked at the terrified faces staring up at him and made the same decision he'd made in a dozen combat zones. Sometimes you had to risk everything to save everyone. "Counter-offer," Santiago said, his voice carrying deadly calm. "You let the children go, and I'll show you exactly why they called me the Reaper." Wong laughed. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outsmarted. What could you possibly?" The lights went out. In the darkness that followed, Santiago proved that some predators hunt best in their natural element. Chapter 8. Into the Darkness. The gymnasium plunged into absolute darkness as Santiago's backup executed a coordinated power cut to the entire building. But darkness was Santiago's element. In Afghanistan, he'd earned his reputation during night operations when other soldiers couldn't see their own hands. Santiago had memorized the room's layout in the seconds before the lights failed. 14 hostages clustered in the center, Miranda near the north wall with the detonator, Wong by the emergency exit, and one more hostile Santiago hadn't initially spotted crouched behind the bleachers. In the chaos of sudden darkness, Santiago moved like a ghost. His first target was the hidden gunman, the immediate threat to the hostages. Santiago's knife found its mark with surgical precision, and the man dropped without a sound. Miranda's panicked voice cut through the darkness. "I'll blow us all up. I swear I will." But Santiago could hear the tremor in her voice. Miranda was a civilian who'd gotten in over her head, not a hardened operative. Fear was making her unpredictable, but also slow to react. Santiago's earpiece crackled with updates from his team. "Ghost Wolf, we have snipers in position on surrounding rooftops, but no clear shots through the windows. Your call on entry. Negative on entry. Too many variables. I've got this." Santiago could hear the children whimpering in the center of the room, their teachers whispering reassurances. Every protective instinct screamed at him to get between the hostages and the threats, but tactical doctrine demanded patience. Wong's voice carried through the darkness, calm and controlled. "Very impressive, Santiago. But you've made a tactical error. Miranda's not the only one with explosives." Santiago felt his blood chill. Wong was too calm, too confident for someone trapped in darkness with a special forces operator. "The children's school bags," Wong continued conversationally. "Amazing what you can hide in a backpack these days. Remote detonators, impossible to disarm without the proper codes." Santiago's night vision equipment revealed the horrible truth. Each child was wearing their backpack, and small LED lights were now blinking on each one. Wong had turned the children into walking bombs. "Now then," Wong said, "I believe we have your attention." Santiago forced himself to remain calm, to think tactically despite the nightmare scenario. Wong was using the children as both hostages and weapons, a level of depravity that went beyond simple criminality. "What do you want, Wong?" "Your surrender. Your public confession that you've been running a vigilante operation against legitimate businessmen. Your cooperation in identifying other retired operators who might interfere with our work." Santiago realized the full scope of Wong's plan. This wasn't just about Emma or even the trafficking network. This was about neutralizing every veteran who might pose a threat to organized crime. Use Santiago's capture and confession to discredit the entire special operations community. "And if I refuse?" "The children die, their families mourn, and the message is sent. Even America's best soldiers can't protect their own communities." Santiago activated his throat mic, whispering instructions to his backup. "I need a miracle. Can you remotely disable electronic detonators?" The response crushed his hope. "Negative. Unknown frequency, military-grade encryption. Would need direct access to the master controller." Santiago looked through the darkness toward where he estimated Wong was standing. The master controller would be on Wong's person, probably hardened against electronic interference. Santiago made a decision that would have been impossible for anyone who hadn't spent years learning to kill in absolute silence. "Wong," Santiago called out, "you win. I surrender." Wise choice. But first, a demonstration of good faith. "Throw your weapons toward my voice." Santiago tossed his sidearm across the room, the metallic clatter echoing in the gymnasium. But he kept his knife, his hands, and most importantly, his training. "Now walk toward me, slowly." Santiago began moving through the darkness, but not directly toward Wong. Instead, he used a hunter's approach, circling, using sound to mask his true direction, closing distance while appearing to comply. Wong's mistake was assuming darkness affected Santiago the same way it affected everyone else. When Santiago struck, It was with the swift silence that had made him legendary. Wong never felt the knife that severed his spinal cord at the base of his neck, a strike that caused instant paralysis without death. The master detonator fell from Wong's nerveless fingers, and Santiago caught it before it hit the floor. "Miranda," Santiago called out, his voice carrying absolute authority. "It's over. Drop the detonator and step away from the children." Instead of compliance, Santiago heard Miranda's voice, high and hysterical. "You think you've won? This is bigger than Wong, bigger than all of us. They have networks in every major city, backup plans for the backup plans." Santiago was already moving toward her voice, but Miranda's final words chilled him to the bone. Emma was never supposed to be the only target. She was the bait to bring you out of hiding. Every child in this room has a parent in law enforcement or military service. This was always about sending a message. The lights suddenly blazed back to life, revealing a scene from Santiago's worst nightmares. Miranda, standing among the hostages with a second detonator, her finger already pressing the trigger. Santiago had a split second to make the most important decision of his life. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. In a microsecond before Miranda's finger could complete its motion on the detonator, Santiago made a choice that would define him forever. Instead of diving for cover or trying to tackle Miranda, he threw himself between the children and the blast that was coming. But the explosion never came. Emma's voice echoed through the gymnasium sound system. "Dad, the detonator's a fake. I hacked their communications. They only had one real bomb, and Wong had the only real trigger." Santiago's daughter had been listening to radio chatter from her position with the FBI team, using skills Santiago hadn't known she possessed. Emma had inherited more than just his physical courage. She'd inherited his tactical mind. Miranda stared at the useless device in her hands, her last card played and worthless. The children were safe, Wong was paralyzed and captured, and the trafficking network's command structure was in shambles. But Santiago wasn't done. "Detective Morris," Santiago spoke into his throat mic. "I need 5 minutes alone with Miranda before you take her into custody." "Santiago, you know I can't. 5 minutes. That's all I need." Morris's voice came back reluctantly. "Make it 3. Santiago approached Miranda with the measured pace of a predator finally cornering its prey. For months, this woman had shared his bed, eaten meals with his daughter, pretended to love them while planning their destruction. "You're going to prison for the rest of your life," Santiago said quietly. "But that's not enough. Not for what you did to Emma. Not for what you plan to do to these children." Miranda's beautiful mask had finally fallen completely away, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Go ahead, hit me. Prove you're just another violent soldier who can't control himself." Santiago smiled coldly. "Violence? Miranda, you have no idea what I'm capable of. But I'm not going to lay a finger on you." Santiago pulled out his phone and showed Miranda the screen. Bank records, communications logs, evidence files, everything that would destroy not just Miranda, but every person she'd ever cared about. "Your mother, Robin Cooley, the sweet retired teacher, she's going to learn that her daughter is a child trafficker. Your sister in Phoenix? She's going to discover that family gatherings were planning sessions for kidnapping. Every friend, every relative, every person who ever believed in you. They're all going to know exactly what you are." Miranda's face went white. Santiago could see her realizing that death would have been kinder than the social annihilation he was promising. "But that's still not enough," Santiago continued. "You see, Miranda, you made one crucial error. You assumed I was just a soldier. But soldiers fight for causes, for countries, for abstractions. What you threatened wasn't abstract." Santiago's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every word carried the weight of absolute promise. "You threatened my daughter. That makes this personal. And when it's personal, I don't just fight. I destroy everything my enemy ever cared about, everyone they ever loved, every dream they ever had. I turn their existence into a living nightmare that makes death seem like mercy." Santiago stepped closer, close enough that Miranda could see the absolute lack of mercy in his eyes. "You're going to prison, Miranda, but prison is just the beginning. Every day for the rest of your life, you're going to wake up knowing that I'm out here, free, successful, raising my daughter to be strong and proud. And you're going to know that your life ended the moment you decided to threaten mine." Santiago turned and walked away as federal agents moved in to arrest Miranda. He had no more words for her, no more time to waste on someone who had chosen to prey on children. Detective Morris appeared at Santiago's side. "That was darker than I expected from you. Some people deserve darkness." Santiago left the gymnasium and stepped into the morning sunlight, where Emma was waiting with victim services counselors. When she saw him, she broke away and ran into his arms. "Dad, are you okay?" Santiago held his daughter tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "Alive. Safe. Home. I'm perfect, sweetheart. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Scared, but okay." Emma pulled back to look at him seriously. "Dad, what I found in those papers, there are more operations like this. More kids in danger." Santiago looked at his remarkable daughter and made a decision that would change both their lives. "Emma, how would you feel about Dad going back to work? Not the military, but something related. Something that helps protect families like ours." Emma's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like a guardian angel, but scarier?" Santiago laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in days. "Something like that." 3 months later, Santiago Kramer officially founded Kramer Security Solutions, a private firm specializing in protecting military families from criminal retaliation. Emma, despite her age, served as the company's junior consultant, her natural intelligence gathering skills proving invaluable. Miranda Whitney Kramer received a life sentence for her role in the trafficking network. Christian Jacobs died from his wounds before he could stand trial. Edwin Wong was sentenced to death, though he would spend the remainder of his life paralyzed in a maximum security facility. But most importantly, the network they'd uncovered led to the rescue of 43 other children and the arrest of over 200 criminals across 7 states. On quiet evenings, Santiago would sit on his porch with Emma, teaching her chess and watching the sun set over the mountains. These were the moments that mattered, not the missions or the medals, but the simple peace of a father and daughter who had survived something terrible and emerged stronger. "Dad," Emma said one evening, studying the chessboard between them, "do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't figured out what they were doing?" Santiago moved his knight, protecting his queen while setting up a future attack, the kind of tactical thinking that had defined his life. "Every day, sweetheart. But that's why we learn to be stronger, smarter, and more careful, so other families don't have to go through what we did." Emma smiled and moved her bishop, a brilliant sacrifice that Santiago hadn't seen coming. "Checkmate, Dad." Santiago looked at the board and realized his daughter had been planning that victory for 6 moves. He'd taught her tactics, but she'd developed strategy on her own. "Well played," Santiago said, prouder than he'd ever been of any military achievement. "Want to go again?" "Always," Emma replied, already resetting the pieces. Outside, the Colorado mountains stood silent and strong, keeping watch over a father and daughter who had looked into darkness and chosen to become the light that others could depend on. The Reaper had found his most important mission, being a dad. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.